Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to continue our college football predictions with Week 9. This is already Week 9, but last week went 20-9, grand total record of 114 and 47. And we're only about a week or two away from the real playoff rankings, and we're slowly seeing some of the contenders come into shape. But for now, let's get into these games. We got quite a few of them again. Starting off with the California Bears taking on the Virginia Tech Hokies. And for Virginia Tech, they're coming off a bye week. Last time we saw them, I believe, no, it wasn't when they lost to Wake Forest. They lost to another game after that. Can't remember who. But for California last week, they beat the Tar Heels of North Carolina. And it was a much closer game than most people anticipated. And looking at this game, we are with the game being Virginia Tech, and they're actually surprisingly favored. And given that ACC shenanigans has been happening on Friday nights, I'm gonna go ahead and lean towards the Hokies to win at home. They're at home. Cal got to travel a long way, but I will not be surprised if Cal ends up taking this because they've done it before and they could do it again. And then we have the UCLA Bruins taking on the Indiana Hoosiers. UCLA winning their third game in a row, this time over Maryland. They'll be going on the road taking on Indiana, who easily beat Michigan State. And now at this point, Indiana's road to the playoffs, they should be super comfortable outside of maybe one game. And yeah, even though UCLA could do the funniest thing possible, I still got Indiana winning this. That school right now is on a roll. And then we got speaking of schools that are on a roll, we have Syracuse Orange taking on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Syracuse losing the Pit, and Georgia Tech getting a road win over Duke. And now with this, and with their schedule easing up, Georgia Tech should be super comfortable until they play Georgia and season's end. In this game, 17.5 point favorites. Yeah, I'm going to go with well, not the Hokies, the Yellow Jackets to win this game. And then we got a pretty tightly contested SEC matchup between the Ole Miss Rebels and the Oklahoma Sooners. Ole Miss losing a hard-fought battle against Georgia on the road, but let's be real, I can't be too mad at them. They put up 35 points against the supposedly Georgia vaunted defense, which apparently Georgia's defense has been kind of underwhelming this year. Oklahoma, on the other hand, bounced back, got a road win over South Carolina. And with this, ugh, Oklahoma's at home, but they're not. But they have not played. What they looked good last week, but it didn't look great. Ole Miss, on the other hand, they do have some. I think Ole Miss has a little more to play for, and they showed a lot of heart. I'm gonna go with the road team and Ole Miss to win this one. And now we go the Virginia Cavaliers taking on the North Carolina Tar Heels. Virginia almost losing to Wazoo at home. It took a safety for them to barely escape that win on the CW. While North Carolina, they lost again to Cal, but I'll give them some credit. They played better. But against a ranked Cavaliers team that's vying for an ACC title, wait a minute. It's going to be hard for me to go against that. And now we have the Northwestern Wildcats taking on the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Northwestern, I do owe this school an apology because I said Purdue was going to beat them at home. Turns out they end up not only beating Purdue, they shut them out. Meanwhile, Nebraska lost. They too lost on a Friday night to Minnesota, and they looked terrible doing it. That's the Nebraska we all know. 8.5 favorites at home. I am going to go ahead and lean towards Nebraska to win this one, become bowl eligible, and stay in the ever so tight fight in the Big Ten. And now we have the Rutgers Scarlet Knights taking on the Purdue Boilermakers. Purdue getting shut out by said Northwestern, as I mentioned in the previous game. And Rutgers, they lost yet again. And this one, and Rutgers, Oh boy, they're only 3 points, but this is not going to be a good game. This is not going to be a good one. But I am going to pick Rutgers because I'm done with Purdue. And now we have a interesting ACC matchup between the Wake Forest Demon Deacons hosting the SMU Mustangs. SMU getting a win over Clemson that was battling some injuries and avenging the ACC championship loss that they had last year. And they too are in the thick of it of the ACC battle. They got some hotly contested battles coming up pretty soon within that conference. Meanwhile, Wake Forest, they're coming off a bye week, but last time we saw them was that long road trip over Oregon State, where they've had their most dominant victory of the season. Sure, Bobby Ashford didn't play, but that game was carried by Damon Claiborne. And with this one, they said they're giving SMU very little points in this one. I'm still going to take SMU to win this game, but according to the bettors, they think Wake's going to give it a good fight. And I think this is going to be a pretty good matchup. And now we got the Battle of Kansas. Kansas State taking on the Kansas Jayhawks. And I believe the Jayhawks are coming off a bye week, but last time we saw them, they got shellacked by Texas Tech. Meanwhile, Kansas State, I think they too also coming off a bye week, but last time we saw them, they were beating up on TCU. And this matchup, Kansas State has won, I want to say they won like 50 straight again in this rivalry. That's what it feels like. And I think this one, even though Kansas is favored, I am still going to pick the Kansas State Wildcats to win this game. And now we got another SEC matchup between the Auburn Tigers taking on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Auburn losing another heartbreaker, this time to the Missouri Tigers, and the Arkansas Razorbacks losing a heartbreaker, this time against the Texas A&M Longhorn, Texas A&M Aggies. I'm really getting these schools mixed up today. And they're giving Arkansas 2 points, maybe because they're at home, but I think this one could go in any matchup. And I'm gonna say it again: Auburn is due for a win. I think they have just enough on their defense to get this done. Although Taylor Green he pretty much gonna have to carry the team on his back. Seriously, that brother should enter the portal this offseason. And now we got Alabama taking on South Carolina. Alabama got through the gauntlet. They had 4 straight ranked games, 4 straight ranked victories. And now they're looking back like the old unstoppable Alabama that we known of past. And they'll be taking on the South Carolina Gamecocks, who are falling apart pretty quickly, losing at home to Oklahoma. Now, last time we saw these two schools, it was South Carolina gave it a good fight, but they came up just short. But with Alabama coming on, they're red hot. I don't see any signs of them slowing down. I'm going to go with the Tide to win this one. And win this one pretty big. That's the one thing I have noticed about Alabama. While they won these ranked games, they haven't won them as largely as they should be. That's something you should keep your eye on. And then we have somehow the college game day game of the week. We have the Missouri Tigers taking on the Vanderbilt Commodores. Missouri getting a pretty close win over Auburn. It was a hard-fought win. And Vanderbilt beating up on LSU. A pretty impressive game against LSU. And now for the first time, and it feels like it's first time in forever, Vanderbilt's in the top 10. Who saw this coming? And you know what? Game day is going to be there. Atmosphere is going to be borderline euphoric. I hope the Vanderbilt guy is there too. All signs point to a Vanderbilt victory. To think we could see Vanderbilt in the college football playoff. That's wild. And now we got the BYU Cougars taking on the Iowa State Cyclones. BYU winning the Holy War against Utah. And don't look now, they're still undefeated. They're not getting a lot of love. But they're tops of the Big 12, which I think is one of the weaker conferences in college football. They'll be taking on Iowa State coming off a bye week where that school is beginning to fall apart at the seams. Last time we saw them, they lost to Colorado. And with this game, Iowa State is still favored by quite a bit. And oh boy, I feel like this one's really tough to predict. I can see this one going anyway, and although Iowa State is favored, you know what? I'm actually gonna give them the win. They're coming off a bye week. They're at home. They're favored. Things do point to an Iowa State victory, but if BYU wins, I'll eat all the crow I can. Illinois taking on Washington, and Washington's coming off a pretty tough loss to Michigan, where they only scored 7 points. Now you see why they weren't ranked. They'll be taking on the Illinois Fighting Illini, which I believe they're coming off a bye week. In this game, yes, another one of those can go in any direction. And although I do like Washington, I'm actually going to go with Illinois and the Fighting Illini to win on the road. But I do expect this one to be a really good game. And now we got the Minnesota Golden Gophers taking on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Minnesota picking up a huge home win over Nebraska. Iowa, on the other hand, they got a good win due to their offense against Penn State. Yes, their offense managed to show up. Well, rushing offense managed to show up. And typical Iowa game, I'm not expecting a lot of points. This might be 12-3 at halftime. But I still think Iowa at home will get the win, and I'll wave to the kids in the hospital. Now, that's one thing I also noticed about Iowa. Even when they play on the road, they do the Kinnick wave. That's really nice. And then we have the NC State Wolfpack taking on the Pitt Panthers. And State's coming off a bye week. Pitt's coming off beating Syracuse. And people don't know this. Pitt holds the cards to the college football playoffs. Not for their own fate, but for other schools. And we'll get to those when we deal with those. But for now, I'm gonna go with Pitt to win this game. They're at home. State, even though State is coming off a bye week. Ugh. But I will say Texas Tech will not cover that spread. That's too large. And now we got Baylor taking on Cincinnati. Baylor coming off a loss to TCU. Cincinnati coming off a bye week. But last time we saw them, they beat UCF in a much lower scoring game than you may remember. And with Cincinnati being at home, and I know this one could go in any direction, I'm going to take the home team in this situation. Now we got Texas taking on Mississippi State. Texas coming off an unimpressive road victory over Kentucky, where they had to use overtime to get the win. And as for Mississippi State, I don't know when their next win's going to come. Because last week, they lost to Florida, which was possibly one of their few chances to getting a win in conference play. I do think Mississippi State do have a chance here, but taking on a Texas defense, it's hard to go against that. I gotta go with the Longhorns to win. And now we have TCU taking on West Virginia. TCU coming off a win over Baylor, and West Virginia is coming off a loss to UCF. And TCU is favored by double digits on the road. Hard to me to go against that. I'm going with TCU. Can someone explain to me how Luke Fickell still has a job? And now we have the Stanford Cardinals taking on the Miami Hurricanes. Stanford getting a kind of a surprising victory over Florida State. Maybe that goes to show you that Florida State were frauds. And speaking of frauds, Miami losing their first game against Louisville. They actually had, and just when you think Miami had control of the ACC, they do this. Carson Beck those 4 interceptions in a stunning home loss. And I would say one loss is just one loss, but looking at their remaining schedule, there are some seesaw games within that. within that schedule. And with this one, yeah, 30 points. If Miami ends up losing to Stanford, you gotta pack the boys up, pack them up, and taking on Boston College in Louisville. I feel like Louisville every year finds a way to destroy the ACC's hopes and dreams within. No, last year they destroyed somebody's hopes and dreams. I can't remember who it was. It'll come to me when I talk after probably when I talk about this game. But they're the ones that's coming off a win over Miami. And Boston College, they lost to UConn. Bill O'Brien's days there are numbered. And 25.5 points favorites, I'm gonna go against. I gotta go with Louisville to easily get a win here. And hey, Louisville, they too are in the hunt for the ACC title. Seriously, the ACC is wide open outside of maybe Georgia Tech. Yeah, Michigan's probably going to end up beating Michigan State. This rivalry has not been close since Mel Tucker's been there. Y'all know that. And Tennessee will be taking on Kentucky. Tennessee coming off of kind of an embarrassing loss to Alabama. Yes, they're on the road, and you can look at that, but if you actually look at that game, it was pretty bad. I don't think the scoreboard told the story of that game. It wasn't even close. Meanwhile, Kentucky, while they gave a hard fought battle against Texas, their good wasn't good enough. But at least they showed fight. And I think this game they're going to show some fight as well. But I think Tennessee, they know they can't afford to lose another game if they want a glimmer of a playoff hope. So I'm going to go ahead and give Rocky Top the win. And now we got Houston taking on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Arizona State's coming off a big win over Texas Tech, a Texas Tech team that was missing their quarterback. And Houston, they're coming off a win as well. And I can't remember who they beat last week, but I know they won. And looking at this game, you think Arizona State is favored? Yes, sure, but I think Houston is going to make this a pretty good game. And by the way, Houston's last win came against Arizona State's rival, the Arizona Wildcats. But I'm still going to roll with the Sun Devils. They're at home. They're still one of the best teams in the Big 12. Just one conference loss on the year. They too are in a wide open space in that conference. In the After Dark game of the week, we have the Colorado Buffaloes taking on the Utah Utes. Colorado's coming off a bye, but last time we saw them, they got a win over Iowa State. Utah, on the other hand, lost the Holy War for their second. I think this is back-to-back years that they lost the Holy War, and they're actually favored by double digits. But I think Colorado is going to give it a good game. And it's after dark. I'm expecting shenanigans, but I do think at the end, Utah's going to come out on top. Probably won't cover, but they'll get the job done. And this brings us to our quote unquote game of the week. I had a rough time picking what's the best game this week. And to be frank, if Memphis would have won last week, if Memphis would have won last week against UAB, it would have been in this spot. But I think this game here have some layers. You got Texas A&M taking on the LSU Tigers, but this is no ordinary LSU Tigers. This is Death. They're going to Death Valley at night, the toughest environment to play, unless you're Alabama. A&M coming off a pretty close victory over Arkansas. It was much closer than you think, but A&M managed to get the job done. Well, if you know me, if you know them, a collapse isn't coming. Just watch. They'll be taking on LSU, who's already thoroughly collapsed against Vanderbilt, because they don't know how. And what a way to waste their offense. Now, why did I chose this as game of the week? One, I sense a trap for A&M, number 3 ranked team in the country. They're on the road, and they're going in a pretty tough environment in LSU. at night. So you know that atmosphere is going to be rocking. But if Brian Kelly loses this game, you might as well pack him up. Which I think some of the people, they're going to pack him up anyway. But okay, winner goes. I would lean towards A&M to win, but that LSU environment at home is always tough for me to go against that. I think LSU will get the upset at home, but if they lose, pack them up. They're done. And that concludes the college football predictions for week 9. Tell me what y'all think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Gamble safely. I'll see you next time.